Okay.
And so, how you doing, guys? This is Adrian A over K Kennedy, and today I'm with Ed Massey, one of our artists that has joined us in the Mentors Collective, and we're just going to be having a conversation. He's going to be talking about his art and what he has coming forward. So, how you doing today, Ed?
I'm great, Adrian. How are you doing?
Good, man. I can't complain at all. How were your holidays and everything?
Good. I'm glad those are kind of out of the way right now, and
Oh
now
yeah.
moving forward from saw a lot of family and all the good stuff. Gained a couple pounds, I'm sure, but
Oh
we
yeah.
can start moving on now in the new year. Hopefully, 2022 will be a great year for everybody.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to it, and I'm definitely glad that the holidays are over as well. So good times, but it's definitely now back to more of the normal routine. So
Great.
yeah, we're just going to have an interview today. I'm just going to ask you a few questions, and to start off, tell me, how did you get started creating art?
I always, since I was very young, always worked in little sculptural pieces. Had a family that was very much kind of like let us do what we wanted to do for the kids, and then continued on in school and in elementary school. I was part of the public school system and took
Mhm.
as many art classes as I could, just really for fun. But I really enjoyed them, and then in high school continued with the high school courses again, part of the public school when the public schools had those great wood shop and acrylic courses,
Oh
and I was
yeah.
part of I was awarded into the state fair as I think a freshman or sophomore. So I
Oh
got
wow.
some recognition, which was pretty cool as a young kid.
Yeah, that's super cool. I mean, winning awards and getting in the state fair as a kid, and I mean those programs, were super helpful back then, and I wish they were still around today. So, but yeah, that's super cool. And so, what would you say in kind of inspires you to create your art?
I was always fascinated by toys. I'll be
Hmm.
honest. It's a little bit different today. I'm sad, and I used to go even an adult. I would go into toy stores, and my kids, when I had kids later on, they would say, "Dad, what are you getting me?" I was like, "I'm getting myself something. I'm not getting you anything." No, I love like manipulation of toys. I like the way they're produced. I like the silk screens in the art. I think they're some of the most magnificent items for someone in the visual arts, especially someone that deals with figurative work like I have in so much of my work. I got really inspired by seeing and visiting toy stores.
Wow, that's I would have never thought about a toy store as a place to get inspired by art. But if you think about the pieces, it takes a lot of artistic design to create them, and action figures and dolls and I imagine they have really great artists that work on these things. So yeah, that's really a good place for it. And so yeah, let's pull up one of your pieces and get your thoughts on this. I'm just going to share my screen here, and let's see if I can make this a lot bigger. And let me know when you can see my screen. And
Okay, I see. Oh, there we go. I see it right now.
there we go.
Yeah.
And so tell me about this piece.
Well, that was back 1980, 87. I was an undergraduate student at UCLA, and my interest was sociology. I was a sociology Spanish major, and I wasn't part of the art world at that point. Not in the fine art program, and I was in one of my last years, I think my second to last year at UCLA, and a fellow student of mine started showing me some of her drawings. So it was a friend of mine. She was showing me some drawings. I go, "Those are fantastic. What are you doing with those drawings?" She goes, "Well, I'm entering into the UCLA fine art competition. It's open to the entire student body." And she goes, "Ed, do you do art?" And I said, "Yeah, I love art." And she goes, "Well, you should consider it. It was, I think she showed it to me like on a Thursday, end of the week, Thursday or Friday. And the competition deadline was that Monday.
Oh
And so
wow.
yeah, it was one of those wild things, but it was a turning point for me because I was a sociology major, and then all of a sudden, that competitive side of me, like, wow, I love sports and competition. There's a competition, fine art. I wasn't part of the art program there, but I could still enter it as a open competition. So I started sketching some ideas, and then I started building and building, and then I showed the sketches to the program heads, and they awarded me the next level. So I think they went from hundreds and hundreds of applicants to maybe 25 applicants. They said,
Oh,
okay,
wow.
you have about 4 weeks to complete your whatever you're going to make. Now, I went, maybe it was 6 weeks. I went a little overboard by making a life-size piece called Statistical Theories and Analytical Principles for Non-Majors. That's what you see right there. It's 8 feet across, 4 feet tall.
What?
Those are life-size figures.
I thought they were smaller.
No, that's life-size. That's life. I had to get a bunch of my friends. I had to get a bunch of my friends on the campus in a van, and we trucked this thing out there to show the jury, what I completed. And they're like, oh, everyone else probably came in with smaller pieces.
Right.
And this crazy sociology major comes in with this life-size wall relief. But that was a part of my statistics class. That's Bernoulli's trials for anyone who knows math.
I mean, it's a real formulas like Bernoulli's principle and flow of liquids and things.
Oh, you know better than I do, Adrian. I was one of those 2 students there, so I don't recall too much of the Bernoulli's, the probabilities or Bernoulli's, the information or what I should have learned out of that class, actually. But that was my response to taking non-major courses, and I of course had to take these probability courses for someone who was not inclined to the math that I should have been. But anyway, that was a pivotal piece because I ended up being one of the 10 finalists, but they didn't choose me for the last 5. They asked me, the piece was going to go up on a campus anywhere as a permanent installation. So I said I wanted it in the largest lecture hall facing the professor in the back of the room to remember they're dealing with students here. So they didn't award me the final placement, but it was kind of my launching pad because I could see that people were gravitating towards this piece. I made it, of course, for myself, but with this competition in mind. So this was kind of a pivotal piece as a sculptural and one of my first wall reliefs.
Oh, wow. That's cool. That's cool. And so then what did you end up going from there as far as with your creativity and your different artwork?
Yeah, I'm going to jump back 1 sec. So I was actually also designing clothing. I really enjoyed, especially activewear. I was really involved in designing men's and women's clothing, kind of learning on my own at the time, and had a grandmother who was a seamstress. I gave her some designs I wanted to pattern out. And so I started dabbling in the clothing industry with not really knowing very much about anything. Didn't have any family members or friends in that line or that business, and started designing. That's kind of a funny photo of that was me modeling one of our shorts that I designed. And of course, I took this very pompous photo, kind of like on this horse and kind of like Lawrence of Arabia or something in the desert. But that's one of our shorts, and we did a lot of clothing lines for a lot of major labels, for a lot of companies, and Neiman Marcus, Marshall Fields, a lot of the big high-end companies started taking a lot of the designs I was working on, which was really neat at that time because I was young.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's a Sean Connery-esque photo that you have there.
I wish I looked that good, but I'll take that as a compliment.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely a good look. And so then you got into making different fashions. That's super cool.
Yeah, we ended up doing a lot of like outerwear, jackets and shirts, of course, and women's gear and even bags, handbags, and so forth. And I was doing that for about 5 years. And one thing I noticed with fashion for me was that that it had to be functional. We were selling to stores and retailers, and it had to be functional. And at that point, in my early 20s, I was really more interested in things that couldn't be done necessarily. And that didn't jive well with the fashion world and with, marketing and so forth. So I kind of left the fashion business and started dabbling into that art, like you saw that earlier piece, because I enjoyed kind of freewheeling and doing things on my own and not having like those gatekeepers, like the buyers at retail stores saying, hey, it's not functional enough. We can't really use that. So here, being in the visual arts and free, it was really like freedom to express, and I jumped on it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you definitely don't want to be restricted in your creativity when it comes to creating anything. So, and tell me about this piece. And so I see pieces of the photograph in here. So I
Yeah,
imagine there's a story behind it.
there is. Okay, so I'm gonna jump. Okay, so after this, if you show this piece called Corporate Ladder, it'll make a lot of sense. But so I did. So I finished my undergraduate studies as a sociology major at UCLA, and thought, okay, do I really want to go into academic writing? I wanted to continue into graduate studies, but I wasn't a great writer, and I really didn't want to do field research. And I was also, as you could see, dabbling in the visual arts, and I could see that there was a powerful messaging that could be done, and there was that instantaneous reaction to people when you put a piece out there. You get the response. Sometimes it's visceral, whether it's positive or negative. I'm going to know if I'm in that same room as someone. If I do a painting, I can see by their body language and their facial expressions. Okay, this isn't for them, or you know what, they're kind of liking this piece here. So I ended up going to Columbia University for my fine arts study. So I went to New York, and I was kind of an outcast there. I was the only non-fine art major, kind of like at UCLA. I was this non-fine art major going into the studio art competition. I was the only student in the graduate level in New York that wasn't in the fine art program prior. So I had no art history at that time. I knew art just because my mother, being Mexican, she had shown our family, the kids especially, the Mexican muralist, visiting Mexico City many times. So whether it was Siqueiros or Roscoe Rivera, those were the main focal points. My mom was a graduate student, or a student from the UNAM University, where you had these beautiful Diego Rivera paintings, accessible and to the general public, literally 24 hours a day, which became important to me later on. But anyway, back to this dartboard. I was literally working on this piece called Corporate Ladder. I was working my rear off, and the professors would come into the studio, and they would be more interested in my floor, like the residual paint stains that were coming off my sculptures. And they would literally, this is no joke, they would critique my floor and ignore the works that I've been working on for weeks and weeks. And I mean, like to literally like punch me in the stomach. They're like, hey, we don't really know what you're doing here, basically, but you're here at the university. You're in this really kind of elite program, and you really don't fit in with the rest of the students, the painters, sculptors, printmakers, whatever there were at the time. They didn't have a photo department at that period. But they said, they would kind of like, and because I was so out there in a sense, like didn't understand a lot of the theories of fine art history and predecessors going back, to modern art and contemporary art, of course. I was learning, I was playing catch up. I was great. I was great subject to kind of like be as a punching bag for a lot of the professors. So anyway, this piece is called My Gift to Columbia University. And I took that very kind of pompous photo of me, kind of like, on that horse without saddle, in a pair of shorts. And I presented them a actual dartboard, taking that photo image of me and saying, here you are, to the professor. So for my thesis graduate final, this was my gift back to the university. Now, the professors came into the room, I'll never forget, and they demanded the darts. They're like, give us the darts. They wanted to make do it. So anyway, the piece behind me is a print of that. But it brings back really great memories, because I learned a lot from that whole experience in my graduate studies. So that's what that is right there.
Yeah, that's cool. And I mean, I imagine they had some interesting statements whenever they saw that dartboard. Like, wow, we were looking for something like this.
They needed a punching bag. I think I was their punching bag.
Good stuff. And so let's look at another piece. So you brought up the Corporate Ladder.
Yep.
And so I'm going to pull that up here in a second. And I definitely want to get your thoughts on this piece, because it looks like it has a few themes going on with it.
Yeah, that's the Corporate Ladder. Boy, it brings back good memories also. So this was done. So if you can imagine, like a young guy, early 20s, in graduate school in New York, and a corporate art consultant had seen some of my work back in Los Angeles. And they said, Ed, we have a client that really loves what you've been doing in your sculptural pieces. And they're asking if you'd be willing to do one of your early pieces, which I did a piece called Corporate Ladder, very small, about 48-inch, 50-inch tall piece. And they said, the name of the company is Principal Financial Insurance Company. Back in the late 80s, they were the largest privately held company purchasing contemporary art in the United States.
Oh, wow.
So they had a lot of real estate, a lot of buildings all over the country. This is just outside of Washington, D.C. in Columbia, Maryland. And they said, look, for the lobby, they would like to ask if you would be willing to do your corporate ladder at some level, depicting the corporate structure that you've done before for this lobby at the entranceway. So of course, as a young guy in graduate school, I jumped on it, right? I mean, this was a very good paying client. It would help me pay my tuition that I would owe to the university. So I took this on privately and secretly. So I was working in the studio on campus, my studio space on campus, but I kind of worked behind the scenes, and I befriended the janitorial staff and would take them out or get pizzas for them. And they gave me an added space, kind of in private.
Oh, wow.
So, because I needed the space. That's a 20-foot tall sculpture. The figures, as you could tell by the man standing at the on the floor there, they're life-size figures. So the men are all, and the women are just under 6 feet or at least 6 feet in height.
Right.
Had to have an aluminum ladder, but this was a time when, again, I was driving in LA, and I was in my wreck of a car at the time as a young person. And I was driving, and I was inundated in West Los Angeles with all these beautiful vehicles all surrounded at the stoplight near me. I was like, oh my goodness. I mean, I'm in this junker. What did it take for these individuals, men and women, to get to what they got, these beautiful vehicles here?
Right.
And I'm thinking about that kind of dog-eat-dog world of the corporate structure, the corporate ladder, right? I mean, these are people that had to probably crawl and fight their way up to the top. And then I was doing a little more research on the corporate structure, and then you had, first of all, this gender and ethnic imbalance in corporate America. This is in the late 80s. You had fully white executives at the top rungs. You had minority groups, even if they were on the ladder, they were going to be at the lower, more menial positions. And women definitely had that glass ceiling. So back in the late 80s, when I did this piece for a very giant corporate client, I jumped on it because this wasn't going into a museum or gallery setting where people would be provoked to see types of projects like this or pieces. This was going in a corporate environment. And this was a public space accessible to anyone entering in this area. And it became immediately controversial. Immediately. It threw me off guard, to be honest with you, because again, I did this in secret. I had people coming in and out of my studio in the wee hours of the night working on it, so my professors wouldn't see what I was working on. And then they ended up finding out what I was working on. And part of the reason why I did that dartboard is that they wanted me out of the program. They said, you know, graduate students are here for academic reasons and not for financial reasons. And they thought because I was commissioned at that time, it was not seen as a positive, or didn't look keen on the program that a graduate student was being paid. Now, again, in the real world, and now things have changed, but in the real world, I've got to pay those bills. And they should have, in my opinion, they should have applauded that, hey, here's a big art consulting firm taking one of their own students to do a big scale project. And it became very controversial. The piece was meant for permanent installation. And unfortunately, there was a vocal minority that felt like either the black executive was too low on the bottom rung, they wanted to see him elevated, or some people felt that the woman was too much in a menial position, and why she's stealing a paper, it doesn't look like a helping hand, and why is the CEO kicking the VP basically in the head and not giving him a helping hand. So yeah, it is what it is, right? It was supposed to be a satirical depiction of corporate America the way it was, and most people saw it the way it was. This is a reflection of reality. But certain people felt, hey, it's too much to handle, too much of a visual stimulus in a corporate environment, and it was taken down.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine there was some hurt feelings about it. Like, you know, people don't like reality sometimes. And I mean, the only way you can change it is to first admit there are problems. So I can definitely see some people not liking it. And from there, where did you end up going as far as with your art and everything?
So that was kind of the opening for me to see how the general public reacted to a public art project. And again, in my art studio, very limited people had seen it. I worked on it for about 5 months. independent from the major population. So very few people saw it, but the comments in the academic setting were about the sculptural issues, the formal issues within the sculpture, but no one really spoke to me about the societal and the social criticism issues and how people may perceive this out in the real world. And that got me thinking, like, the power that I could have as a visual artist by getting this opportunity to do this large scale public project as a 20-year-old, early 20s, was kind of that excitement for me to say, look, if my work, I wasn't a great writer, and at that time I also felt like if I wanted to accomplish my mission in getting an issue that it was important to me, pertinent to myself, to get it out there for the public, the visual impact could be so great. I could see it on this piece. It angered people. It excited people.
Right.
He was kind of a big, like I said, Principal Financial was a huge company. They're still very big, Olympic sponsors.
Oh, yeah.
Big company, and they took a daring piece that they had asked me to do in a very public way. So I just got all jazzed up by that. I was like, God, this is the way I want to go. To have artwork in the rarefied space of a gallery and even a museum setting where very few or relatively few people would ever go to, right? You have the art patrons, you have students, of course, going, and then people in general who want to go into a cultural experience. But it's really a minority group in comparison with the general public. And again, I go back to my Mexican upbringing from my mother's side, where the Mexican muralist became such an integral and important role in my life, because I wasn't exposed to museums really at that point. We were in a family that went to a lot of art showings, but we went, of course, to see the city streets. And my mother, being a social worker, would introduce me to people she was working with the visually impaired or the blind. And also at that time in Mexico City, the lack of resources for that population. So that was her fight. And so I learned a lot, of course, from my mom. But I felt, okay, if I'm going to have a voice, I'm going to do it in this visual way. And I want my art to be very, very public. And that was the corporate lattice. That was the beginning of kind of what I'm doing even today.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good journey as far as having those stories and everything from your mother's influence carry over into the art that you ended up creating as well. And I mean, one of the pieces that were, one of my personal favorites, I'm going to bring it up now because the stories behind the pieces are one of my favorites. And so you definitely have to talk about this piece.
Okay. Yeah. That's okay. So I'm going to step back for just a second, Adrian, because so what happened was I was doing a lot of my work dealing with again, social criticism and bring it out to the general public. So back, it was in 1994, I just finished a project that dealt with sexual assault and the criminal justice system. And that was exposed in Washington, D.C., Chicago, Miami, New York, and LA simultaneously. So that was kind of like, okay, I can do these grand scale projects, so we can do them simultaneously. But at the same time, I also needed a departure. And I was introduced, I finished a children's book called Milton that I worked with a fellow artist. She did the illustrations, I did the writing, and I was introduced to children in hospital environments, and they said, would you be willing to read your book? Became a published book, and I was doing book readings like at Barnes and Nobles and other retail stores. And then I said, yeah, I've never been exposed to children in hospitals, never been into a pediatric care unit that I can remember, other than when I went to one when I was a youth. And so I went in there and I could see that the children that I was reading to were drawing and painting, just like kids in an elementary school or in an outdoor social service program or school or after school program. These kids were doing the same thing, though they had some limitations. Some of them were either going through major hospitalization, they were inpatients, some were outpatients, but either way, they were drawing. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. And that was it. I didn't think much about it. I was invited to another hospital and did the same thing in the playroom, maybe a few months later. And shortly after that, I'd seen that doing public projects, I'd seen that there was a tower up in Los Angeles that was falling apart, and I wanted to get the graduate art program from all the local area LA programs, including Long Beach State, and USC, UCLA, Santa Monica College, some of the schools here, Cal Arts and Art Center, to get the graduate program to scaffold the 170-foot tall structure, to paint it and
Oh,
to,
wow.
to do like a real public project with the public. I was doing all my isolated work like a writer would, or like a choreographer, or dancer, maybe more in isolation, a musician, vocalist. They're doing a lot of their work and rehearsals in private, and then they kind of expose their work out. I'm the same. I work in a studio, and then when it's showtime, it gets out there for the public.
Right.
Well, I also thought, well, wow, there's a potential to have the general public involved in a public art project. And I learned that this structure, and I don't know if you're going to show the Tower of Hope. Anyway, if you see that, or if someone goes on the website, they'll see that was the first large scale public art project working with community. And that was a 170-foot tall structure sitting in the middle of the Beverly Hills Century City area in Los Angeles. And it's just a little bit taller than the Statue of Liberty. And I learned that you couldn't scaffold the structure. This was a structure, I don't know if you see it, Adrian, or not, but it's somewhere under Portraits of Hope. It's called the Tower of Hope, and people can see it later online. And it happened to be the only removable building that I knew of anywhere in the country, maybe in the world, in a metropolitan area, that the walls could be removed. So they weren't made out of brick, or, it's not a brick and mortar. It was like this removable substrate that I wasn't familiar with. So shortly after that, the engineer said, the only way to repaint this is on the ground. And then months later, I went for a run, and I ran around that structure and said, goodness, I've been visiting these kids in hospitals. They're painting. If we could bring some type of paint that was non-toxic, water soluble, everything friendly for the participants, and adhere to the structure or the substrate, wow, we could take their paintings and elevate it up with cranes 170 feet. And that was the beginning of what became Portraits of Hope.
Let me bring that up, because people definitely need to see it. And just to make sure that I have the right thing here.
I forgot to mention that I was, the Tower of Hope was a instrumental part of the large scale civic and public art projects that I not only got very involved in, still to this day, but my brother Bernie as well, who I work with. Okay, so that's the Tower of Hope. So that's just under 170 feet in height. It's painted in what we call the Four Seasons. And a lot of the kids that I was working with and seeing in the hospitals were painting flowers. I wasn't more partial to flowers than any other symbol. I wasn't painting flowers beforehand. People have asked me many times, like, were you like a product of the flower era? Like, is a flower child? It had nothing to do with that. It was just that when I was in hospital settings, and I started touring more and more hospitals to learn and understand, the physical challenges that some children had, even youth and young adults had painting, I had to start devising easygoing methods for everyone to be equal participants. But the flower symbol became really an integral part of so many of the participants in hospitals, for so many of the kids in the child life programs, which is the programs within the pediatric units and the playrooms. Flowers. It didn't matter where the child may have come from, any part of the world getting their medical attention in the United States hospitals, the flower symbol from everywhere was a recognizable symbol of life, of healing, of beauty. So I would see like rainbows and flowers, and sometimes other symbols as well. But the flower symbol became kind of that universal symbol of love and hope. And I thought, wow, for hope, this makes sense. So this tower, what we call the Tower of Hope, has, I believe, 160 separate panels. The bottom ones are 30 feet across by about 15 feet in height. I traveled, had to get permission, of course. That's all. I had to work with elected officials, government, from the US senators to the governor of the state of California to the local municipalities. That tower sits idly between Beverly Hills and Century City. I had to get, of course, the approvals and wanted everyone on board, museum directors, architectural school directors. I wanted the state of California to embrace this project as the first of its kind. So I traveled from Eureka, very northern tip of California, to the Mexican border, Children's Hospital San Diego, Boys and Girls Clubs, you name it. We worked with thousands and thousands of participants to hand paint that tower on the ground and then have it elevated up for literally the entire millions of people drove by that every year, and it lasted for goodness. So it was only supposed to be up for 5 years, and it lasted easily over 10 years. So it was
Wow.
a really kind of a eye-opening experience for me and for, I think, the state of California, to see that kids in hospitals and social service programs could participate in large-scale public projects without any background in the visual arts. Half the kids we work with or more hadn't even painted before. Some had never touched acrylic paints. I had to devise special mouth brushes, shoe brushes, telescope paint brushes, got a lot of pro athletes to work with us. So this way children in tough situations could be, next to an NFL superstar painting with them. And then I got Nike to sponsor all our shoes, because I designed and I have a patent on the shoe brush for children who can't manipulate a brush with their healthy painting hand. So started devising all these ways. So it's a little bit of a departure from what you saw earlier in my, my private work. The public work was meant for the public. It's by the people, of the people, kind of for the people type of sentiment. And it really has to accommodate everyone. So that's what I've gotten involved in for the last 25 years, I think now, since the mid-90s, is these large-scale civic and public art projects. We've traveled outside of the United States to work on them. And of course, we're based here, and we do a lot of work in this country, and we love it.
That's cool.
It's something that's we're very proud of.
Yeah, I mean, you should be proud of it, because, I mean, making tools so more children can paint, like, I don't think, I mean, I had no idea you were even doing, like, and getting patents and stuff. That's real dedication, as far as to helping other people create. And I think that's very big picture, as far as the willingness to be able to get more people involved in that process. And then flowers just being such a easy symbol to recognize as something that, regardless of your language or your background, painting a flower or drawing a flower and, seeing flower in artwork is definitely recognizable by everybody. So yeah, let's look at this now, the plane piece. Tell me about that.
Yeah, that was that was a great project for us. So just after the tower went up in 2003 was the centennial celebration of flight at Kitty Hawk. It was celebrating the first flight. And we were on a TV show, a talk show, and someone from NASA had been watching, I think it was the Rosie O'Donnell show. And I think Rosie had interviewed me, and someone, I think in the Virginia area, maybe Texas, I'm not sure, but someone at NASA had seen the interview, and they said, goodness, we'd never heard of these guys. Again, I work with my brother Bernie, the Massey brothers, whatever they're doing, he's not on the visual art side, but he implements all the education. We navigate the political part of Portraits of Hope. So we work hand in hand on a lot of these large scale public projects. And it was like, gosh, this sounds great to get the community involved. So NASA had invited us to do a mural for the centennial celebration in North Carolina, Kill Devil Hills, which you're familiar with, I think, right, Adrian?
Yeah. I'm born and raised North Carolinian, so. Yeah. Okay,
so my first time out there, but so NASA had said to us, would you guys be willing to paint a mural, using science, maybe objects dealing with flight or, the planet, something like that. And we're like, we don't really do that, but if you give us the freedom to kind of do our own thing, we'll come up with a concept. But God, a mural, and there's no offense with murals. I love murals. I do murals all the time, but I was like, we could do that anytime. What's so special about the flight?
Right.
And they said, well, we're going to invite 100 of the most prestigious and historic planes. The president and at the time, John Travolta, were both the MCs, kind of coordinated hand in hand.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was very cool. And they said, can you guys come up with something? And we said, well, if there's going to be 100 planes, we want to paint an airplane. And they said, well, that's not really going to, literally, it's not going to fly, basically, right? No pun intended. It's not going to work. But we kind of convinced them that we could do it. And I started researching everything I could on how we can get kids involved to paint something that could adhere to an airplane that's going, so fast. It was like most people were like, no, it's not going to happen. Typical in my life, you can't do it, Ed. It's not permissible. You can't engineer it. I get that a lot in a lot of the works, and we end up doing all of them pretty much, Adrian. But this was kind of the first of, I mean, not the first time it happened, but they were cautious, and we understand that, right? I mean, we're a cautious group as well. We're all about health and public safety. That's what our program's about. So we want to make sure everything we're doing is potentially, first of all, is it feasible? Is it doable? And can we engineer it to work? So we found, and we worked with the North Carolina Department of Transportation and NASA and the FAA in conjunction. We said, the North Carolina Department of Transportation found an airplane that they said may work for us, because we were looking at other airplanes. Said the DC-3, 1938, we found a DC-3 1938 that is a very slow moving vehicle, basically, or, a plane. And your vinyl, because we painted on it like adhesive vinyl, could work if the kids paint on the way Portraits of Hope does their work. So we did more research, and it's a beautiful airplane. It's a 100-foot wingspan that you saw there. I think it's 60 or 70 feet in the fuselage, and it was a great surface area. And we said, we're going to travel the country. Since this is a celebration for flight, we're going to travel as many states as we can, starting off at Laura Beta Children's Hospital in Chicago and traveling all the way into Walter Reed Army Medical Center, National Children's Hospital in DC. We travel the country, Florida, Arizona, New Mexico, California, New York. We were traveling into only pediatric care units, brought the material down on the ground. Each flower symbol was hand cut. And then we brought in North Carolina, Formula One and NASCAR installers who do those types of applications. It's not everyone that does applications on planes. And they actually installed that beautiful hand-painted airplane. And again, we had these big Rolls-Royce engines. We had globs of paint from children that may have, painted a little too, exuberantly. And we left it because that's the way the child's going to paint. And we had to make sure it was airworthy. And it was. And it was one of the most beautiful experiences in my life to see that flying machine take off. It lasted, the plane's paint scheme lasted about a week and a half.
Wow.
At the actual celebration, the day of, the Tuskegee Airmen, their representatives and the Tuskegee Airmen pilot and a group of other individuals asked if they could escort us in. And we said, this is one of the most beautiful cultural experiences that we would ever even dream of. Wow. So that photo that you see right there really means a lot to our program. First of all, the Tuskegee Airmen escorted us in, one of the most prestigious, historic of all military aviators in our history. Such an important flying group. And so to have that red tail, P-51 Mustang fly with that DC-3 was just one of the most magnificent days for our program, and for me in particular. So we loved it. And then it was so nice because the children that worked on this, all in hospitals, they couldn't come out to the site that we were aware of. But it was captured on everything from CNN onward. So we know, because we got so many letters later, that the children who worked on it said, I painted that airplane, which is really great. It's just great, such great enthusiasm that the participants enjoyed it, the families enjoyed it, the staffs in the hospital that worked with us, and of course the Portraits of Hope folks and the people who installed it, and everyone in part of the celebration. It was an awesome, awesome experience.
Yeah, that sounds super fun. I mean, especially for such a historic event. And then for them to at first be like, hey, this isn't going to fly, but then actually kind of rolling over and saying, we can make this work, and even finding a plane for you. So, because I thought you guys already had the plane and stuff in mind, but it was, they wanted a mural, and then they got this. That's a lot better.
Oh, it was awesome. It was, I'm telling you, we were looking at small little planes that were very fast, and they're like, no, that seems a little insane. I've worked on projects now with like race cars, NASCAR. I don't know anything about NASCAR, airplanes. We have a proposal for space, and I learned a little bit. I met Sally Ride. She was involved with one of our projects, with our one project. But I learned a little bit on each project. I work with a lot of pro athletes who get involved. We work with entertainment people. It's kind of really neat that a visual artist that, again, from a not specifically traditional art background, but ended up in an art background, starts to kind of spread their kind of tentacles to work with so many different industries, engineers, and I work with elected officials. And like I said, it's really cool. And of course, medical populations and academic populations and schools. It's really, so for me, it's like the most rewarding thing. I love working studio work, but the public projects are where it's at for me.
Yeah, I mean, making those big projects that are, seen by hundreds, if not thousands of people, or even millions, is so much different from any type of studio work. And so now here's one piece that is a stationary public piece that you did, and I'm bringing it up now, and I want to get the story behind this.
Let's see what's coming up. Oh yeah. Okay. So this is a great initiative. This is the revitalization of animal shelters. And so we work with tens of thousands of kids in our project. And in our education component, there's the hands-on painting, but there's education. We deal with different societal themes that are important to the population of participants, which are youth. We work with middle schoolers, high schoolers, graduate colleges, and elementary school students. And many of the kids' focus is about animal welfare, how important it is to treat animals with respect and dignity and humanely. And we were driving up and down doing some work on another project and saw some of these. We found out, we didn't know what they were, but these government buildings were actual animal shelters. And we said, how can we kind of improve the quality of life and rescue these animals from a program like Portraits of Hope, which is animal welfare becomes such an integral and important aspect of what we do, especially for, as I mentioned, not only our program, but for all the participants. It's almost in every region, in every small town or big city we work in, animal welfare is a top priority for so many of the participants. And we said, there's a potential here. We know that color excites people and makes people feel good if we can do colorful projects. And we took, so what we did was we wanted to meet with the elected officials in the largest, really the belly of the beast of animal, the welfare of animal, and that's LA County. They process more animals in their shelter system than any other region in the country, which is probably almost any other region in the world. And they have 7 major shelters, and you have a lot of strays, you have a lot of unwanted, or people can't handle the pets that they may have acquired, and for whatever reason, we have too many animals in these shelters, and they need loving homes. Forever homes. And you have everything from horses and llamas even, and you have turtles, cats, dogs. You have the whole array of animals really that are domesticated that can be adopted. So we said the way that our mission, the way that we could best benefit is to get the general public to step into these areas and see a furry friendly friend that they could take home with them. So I believe there's about 70,000 animals processed in that 1 year. And we have millions of residents in LA County that could adopt. We have many more families that could adopt than we do have the pet population that are homeless pets. So our mission is to deck out these shelters, and we used animal design. So you'll see things, especially with the NFTs, what I thought was so exciting, I know we're going to talk about that in a moment, is how can we get these animals into loving homes. And the way to do it, in our opinion, was to get the community involved and to really aesthetically make these vibrant hubs of where animals are kept for hopefully a short period of time until they're taken into these families. So what you saw there was the Carson Animal Shelter, one of the 7 shelters for LA County. And people stopped. I mean, we know, because we've heard from our partners at LA County Animal Welfare, that the numbers started to increase of adoptions once the general public knew these buildings existed. We did interior settings, exterior, and also because the participants worked on it, it was a great way as a field trip or a family affair, like taking a family member to say, hey, I worked on that shelter. Hey, I did the wall space, or the ceiling space, or the floor space, because we decked them out. So kids would bring their family members and hopefully walk out with a furry friend.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And this is another one of the pieces I think related to the animal shelter as well, correct?
That is so. So the Staffordshire Bull Terrier, the pit bull, is unfortunate circumstance because it's so often a disproportionate number of the dogs in particular that we see. But so many of these pit bulls just need a loving family to go to. So this is so there's a series of different animals. I think there's about 16 different animals that I created, and again with the backdrops of the Portraits of Hope floral or geometric shape thing that are so familiar with so many viewers. And that really kind of excites people to see the animals kind of in a playful but beautiful and meaningful way, because they know that that imagery is going to end up saving a life.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so now that you've talked about the NFTs a little bit, tell me about the animal series NFTs, and in general, what made you want to get into NFTs?
Well, it's interesting because NFTs, of course, is for someone like myself, it's kind of the Wild West. It's this new frontier that is so exciting, and you have so many young artists, really young artists, and you have people that have been around a little bit longer that have the capability now. I mean, to get into this world of having this accessible, I mean, public. I mean, you have this form of on a global level that people can automatically see the work that someone's involved in, a visual artist is involved in, and then you have people from different regions of this, not only in this country but abroad, that may not have access to the art collectors or buyers until they get into this platform of these NFTs. Tell me again, Adrian, I went on a tangent. What was the question part? How did I get interested in the NFTs?
Yeah. What made you want to get interested in the NFTs?
Okay, good. Do you hear that? I'm so sorry. That's my dog thinks I'm not here. That's my dog.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Milo, I'm upstairs. Milo. Oh, I apologize for that. I think everyone's left.
Oh, no worries.
Okay. Milo. He wants some attention. He just went for a good hike. Milo.
Do this. We're going to keep it going.
Okay.
Go get the dog. We're going to wait here for a second.
Okay. Do you mind? Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Milo. Come here. Milo. Come here. Come on.
Oh, this is fun. The dog sounded so sad.
Sorry about that, Adrian.
It's fine. It's fine.
Okay. My apologies. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Here he comes. Okay, sorry. Here he comes. Milo, come here. Come here. Okay. Sorry about that. So the animal welfare program. Hold on. Here he is. Come here. So with the sorry about that. With
No
the
worries.
Can you hear him crunching?
Yeah, I can hear him. He's happy now.
Yeah. You see him?
Yeah, I can see him.
There he is. Okay. Okay.
Special guest appearance here.
Yeah, exactly. So that's my friend Milo, our family pal. Okay. So, right? Yes. Okay. So the beautiful thing, sorry about that pause, the beautiful thing about and the interesting thing about NFTs is that I've created so much of our work digitally. So we have these files that exist that are really meant for the general public, right? Like the Carson animal, all the animal shelters, or the airplane, or New York taxis, or tugboats, or race cars. They're meant for very short periods to be seen by millions of people out in the real world. And the files are all created digitally, which makes it a perfect entryway into the NFT that an individual now, the general public, can own something that may never have access to. The LA Convention Center, you cannot own that piece.
Right.
The individual now can own a segment of that piece, or they can own a segment of the LA County shelters and know that they're doing good in the long run because animals will be helped out so greatly by supporting these the NFTs through the work that I'm involved in. So there's this great, to me, it's this great platform that is going to potentially just open up for so many people, not just for myself, but so many people. Like I said, young artists from all regions of the world now have access to people that they may have never, ever thought they would have the potential to reach out to. So I think that's a beautiful thing about the NFT world, and exciting right now too, right? We're at the very beginning stages of this. So I'm excited.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, and then in the market now, it's really maturing to the point where people can get into it a lot easier. And so definitely excited to be able to have people both be able to support the artists, but then having another medium for artists to be able to, get their artwork out there and, get residual earnings and things like that. So it's definitely changing, not even just in the US, but globally, the interaction between artists and collectors. So, yeah, that's a really good point.
What's so nice, and I mentioned this, sorry, Adrian, to someone just the other day, because this is a topic of conversation with almost everyone I'm in contact with now. NFTs. I mean, you just tapped on it. Democratizes the whole platform of the visual arts and that buyer, right? And also the gatekeepers. That visual artist or that collector that's interested to buy a piece now has access to a lot of people they may not have even had access to prior to, or even known about. So it's a great way to collect art, I think, and it's going to be really interesting, I think, for the upcoming years. How it's very exciting. I think if for those collectors out there, this is a great opportunity right now.
Definitely agree. And looks like we also have some community questions, and only going to be two of them. It's only the first one is, how long did it take you to find your style?
Okay. So sorry. So the style, I mean, I dabbled, as I mentioned earlier, I dabbled a lot. I was really focused on sculpture. And I don't know if you want to show one piece, if you have it, the paintings, the edge paintings. My background was three-dimensional art. I was really kind of like, I liked kind of that very physical nature of mixing concretes and plasters and wood and steel and welding and all those things that, are labor intensive. And then I started, of course, painting a lot of my sculpture. And then I transitioned to paintings. But a lot of the work I do is sculptural and paintings, even with the Portraits of Hope, animal shelters, buildings. So what you see here is going back, this goes back again to my thesis in my graduate studies, is that I used to, mock a lot. Again, I was kind of an outsider in my program, right? I didn't come from that formal art training. I was kind of that guy that was like, again, the Wild West. They used to call me like the cowboy, right? Ed goes after what he wants to do, and he'll figure out a way to do it, and he does it. So, which is really true to this day. I think I try to figure out ways to get even these, what some people would consider impossible projects, off the ground, or things that are kind of like untouchables. But here with this piece that's called edge painting, I did a series of edge paintings as I was leaving my graduate studies, and I would mock these fine art painters because I felt, they're making these paintings. Again, this is before really the computer era. So the people in my program were printmakers, painters, and sculptors, and they were making these two-dimensional paintings with three-dimensional kind of looking organic shapes or shapes. And I was like, whatever you're doing as a painter, you will never get that three-dimensional look that I can create working in sculpture. So that, it was going tugging back and forth. People, again, we were going at it with each other. So for my final works, I said, okay, all you painters, you want to see a real three-dimensional painting? I'm going to make it. And that what you saw there is I took a conventional canvas, inverted it on its edge, painted only the edges, had special frames cut out, and that became, and I didn't care. The surface part where all the other painters would be painting and concentrating their efforts on, I kind of like, I don't care about that part. I only want to make it three-dimensional. And there you go. So again, again, there was that kind of like, oh, there goes Ed again. This guy's a pain in the ass, figuring out things to do that are gonna, kind of like raise eyebrows. But that was again, that was in the early days. So that was my background. I know in a kind of like offbeat way, you'd ask what my style was, but I went from sculpture to painting. And again, the pieces today, like if someone were to ask me, are you a sculptor painter? I'm definitely a combination of both. But the large scale public projects I'm involved in, even though so much of it is concentrated on the painting, they become three-dimensional pieces, whether they're spheres, towers, buildings, vehicles, they're planes, tugboats, blimps, they're all in the round. So to me, they're all sculptural.
Okay, that makes sense. And so we're nearing the close, and so I'm going to ask one last question. What is one word of advice you would have for new artists?
Wow. Okay. Well, I think that if you love what you're doing and you enter in this amazing field, visual arts in particular, because that's what I know, is you just go do it. You've got to continue and do it to the best of your ability and enjoy the process and enjoy the ride, because it'll be a ride, and whatever and wherever it takes you and leads you, it's going to be something that I think will benefit you in the long run. So for any artist that's listening out there, just continue. Now with this whole avenue of NFT world, it's a whole new area. It's so amazing. I think it's amazing. So I'm very excited by it, and I wish everybody the best of luck tackling their desires and interests, especially in the visual arts.
Awesome. That's a great answer. And so with that, I guess we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. It was great talking to you. We'll be having a lot more conversations, and we're definitely looking forward to your NFT collection and all of your pieces. I know you probably have some super top secret projects that you're working on right now, and excited to see those launch.
You'll see them soon, Adrian. I'm happy to be part of Minners, and have a great day as well.
You too.
Thank you.